All right, welcome Elizabeth Harris to the How Does She Do It podcast.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
I'm excited that you're here. And for those who don't know you yet, please introduce yourself. Tell us where you are calling in from and a bit about what you do.
Okay. I am calling in from Maryland. I live in Annapolis, and I am a registered dietitian and a certified intuitive eating counselor. I'm also an entrepreneur. I have my own private nutrition and intuitive eating coaching practice. And I help people heal from, well, break up with dieting and diet culture, and then heal their relationship with food and their bodies, and practice kind of gentle, flexible, enjoyable nutrition that they can and want to stick with.
Wow. Okay. Well, I can't wait to dive in to all of that.
Yeah.
And before we do, tell us a little bit about your personal life. Outside of business, what are some important things we should know about you?
Yeah, outside of business, I am a total foodie. I always tell people it's no accident that I became a dietitian. I love food. I love cooking. I'm obsessed with dark chocolate peanut butter cups. I love to read and garden, and I also am a beekeeper. I'm a hobby beekeeper. And
Interesting.
travel. We travel a ton. We love to kind of travel and explore the world. And my favorite things to do while we're traveling is always to visit farmers markets. I think that they are just fascinating windows into kind of the local culture wherever you are.
Yeah. Who's we?
My family, me and my family, my husband, and I
All
have
right.
three kids also, but yeah,
Okay, you got a husband and three kids.
yeah,
You travel, you keep bees, you got a business, you've got advanced degrees, you got a bunch of passion, you've got a coaching practice. We've got a lot to talk about today.
yeah. Excited to
Okay,
dive in.
so I want to start kind of in the middle. So tell me about first your personal life, where you were in your motherhood journey, your marriage journey, when you decided to go back and get your master's degree as a dietitian.
Yeah, so my kids, well, I studied something completely unrelated in my undergrad. Then I worked
Which
in
was, please tell me.
Actually studied Russian language,
Whoa.
Slavic and East European studies. I wanted to be a translator, and I did go live there for a while with my husband when we were first married and worked on my language. And then I came back, and I won't tell you the whole story, but it set me on a different path, and I kind of worked doing something differently for a while. Then I had children. I took time off. I was very passionate about nutrition and wellness, even though that wasn't what I had studied. I had was diagnosed with an autoimmune disease as a high schooler, actually. And I think,
Mm,
I navigated that, and it taught me the importance of promoting and protecting your health and having agency around that.
mm,
And so around the time that I had children, I was in my late 20s. I was very interested in nutrition. I wanted to kind of eventually pursue that, but it was pretty daunting. I studied Russian, right? I didn't have any science background.
which some would say is daunting to study
Yeah,
Russian.
also daunting, but in a
Yeah.
different way.
Yeah.
Um, I didn't have any background in science, and so I just kind of kept putting it on the back burner. I took time off. I was a stay-at-home mom for a long time. I had three kids. They're all 2 years apart.
Woo,
And
girl.
yeah, and I was sort of dipping my toes in. I took a nutrition class at the local community college. And then I kind of took another one. I took a few more. I really liked it. But to do the whole thing was still super daunting. And
Yeah.
I put it on the back burner for a while. Years went by. I was still
Ha
thinking about it.
Let me know about this.
Yeah.
This is an important thing I want to highlight. You had
Huh?
three kids, 2 years
Mhm.
apart. So you were
Yep.
still trying to keep your interest alive during that time. You took the nutrition class, you did this, you did that. Um, how long did you spend most of your energy dedicated to being a stay-at-home mom before you were like, okay? And how old were your kids when you were like, okay, I'm going to now invest in this?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, probably 10 or 12 years. I
Wow.
was a stay-at-home mom, and I dabbled, did a tiny bit of consulting and for what I used to do, but I was primarily a stay-at-home mom, and I loved it. And but I always knew that eventually I wanted to do something different, and it was really scary because A, I had been out of the workforce for so long at that point, and B, what I wanted to do was a complete and total pivot, and that is pretty daunting. And I'll tell you a quick story. I always think one of the best gifts that was ever given to me when I left the company that I had been working at before when my first child was born, the head of the company pulled me aside and said, and he was a man, and he said, I just want you to know that you are such a valued, member of the team. You will always have a place to come back here. And he said, I actually love hiring women who have been home with children for a while because you guys are awesome at multitasking and seeing
Mm,
things from different angles. I know, and he just kind of went on about uh, what makes you marketable after being a mom. And I hung on to that throughout all those 10 years. It just, there's some times where you're looking, thinking, I don't know
yeah.
how to jump back in and what I'm going to do. And I
Oh,
always
that's
think
so
that was such
true.
a gift.
Oh, that's such a gift because it's so true. I really don't understand where this idea of just a stay-at-home mom comes from. That
Yeah.
is the hardest job available to me in my life. I can't do it. I couldn't do it. So I agree. That was kind that he gave you that gift.
Yeah.
My
So
goodness. Okay.
impactful.
So you took that with you. You still had some confidence that you were going to come back with a bunch of new skills into the workforce. Your
Hmm.
youngest is how old when you go back?
So they were middle school. Well, actually, probably when I started to really taking the classes in earnest, she was still in elementary school. So fourth or fifth grade, probably. And
Okay.
my oldest, would have been 4 years older than that.
Okay.
So late elementary, middle school, I started
Okay.
going back.
All right. Great. Okay. So you took your time, you did the thing. I
Hmm.
have so much respect that you can do this because I can't. I cannot be a stay-at-home mom. It's honestly, it's too hard.
Yeah,
I
it is.
can't
It is
do it.
hard.
It's so hard. But I love that you could do it because I think in my mind of minds, I was like, that's the way. That's the way. I'm gonna have my kids. I'm gonna, and then I'll come back in, and I just literally couldn't do it. So kudos to you for doing that. You go up a
Thanks.
little bit, you refocus what you're wanting to do, pick it up from
Mhm.
there.
So then I started going back to school. I did it very part-time because I was still, the primary caregiver for my children day to day. I took, one or two classes a semester. They I think I had to take 13 science classes just to get into the master's program. And they're
Ooh.
all, very sequential. Anatomy one, anatomy two, organic chemistry one,
Mm.
organic chemistry two. So you kind of have to do it that way anyway. Took all the classes. Eventually, I had my portfolio together, ready to apply to a master's program. Thankfully, I did, and I got into the one I wanted. It was distance and before COVID. So I live in Maryland. I did my master's program at USC in California. Um,
Amazing.
Dialed in every day. I think pretty sure I was the oldest person in the program. I was also one of only three who was doing it distance wise. It was the most kind of stressful and interesting and humbling experiences of my life, actually. You have to become it was they call it a coordinated program. So essentially it means that it was all the master's coursework to get the degree in nutrition and health span and longevity, but then also all of the internship requirements to become a dietitian, which is 1,200 supervised practice hours. And
Wow.
because I was a distant
1,200?
1,200 hours.
1,200 hours?
Hmm.
I need to do
Yeah,
the
yeah,
math. Hold on a
1,200.
second. 1,200 hours. That means
Hmm.
you had to spend 50 days of your life doing supervised hours to get the certification.
Yes.
That's like,
Different kind of areas of the field. And
holy smokes. Okay.
yeah, and
This is
the
intense.
yeah, it was super intense, which is why PSA for anyone out there, get your nutrition advice from qualified professionals because they have all
Amen.
that training.
Yes, we got to talk about this. I want to keep with the story, but we got to come back to this point.
Okay. Okay, we'll come back. So I had to arrange all of those internships because I was not a local student, so they weren't doing it for me. And there's a shortage of dietetic preceptors. So I just had to kind of hit the pavement networking, meeting people. I always I believe had I been trying to do that in my 20s, I don't think I ever would have lined them up. I simply wouldn't have had the confidence or the wherewithal or the kind of stick-to-itiveness, I guess,
Mm.
to do it. But at this point in my life, I didn't care. I would call anyone, I would call multiple times. I knew that I had something that I wanted to do, and I was willing to do whatever it took. So there I was, kind of with middle school and high school age kids at this point doing, working at internships. Some of them are in food service, I was just doing things that you have to do to become a dietitian. And um, while raising my kids, still being the primary caregiver, and also taking the court, getting a master's degree in 2 years.
Oh my
So it
gosh.
was really overwhelming.
Yeah, to say the least. And your husband, does he work?
He does.
Okay.
He's an entrepreneur. Also, he has his own
Oh,
business. He works long
oh,
hours. He
interesting.
travels a decent amount. So he was super supportive, but not really able to, you know,
Take on
jump
more
in.
load because he's
Yeah,
already
not so
got.
much.
Interesting. And did you have anybody in your circle around you that was supporting you during that time?
Definitely mental and emotional support through a lot of friends and women that I knew who were going back and doing, making transitions at that point. And then, yeah, I'm very blessed to have family nearby who helped out a ton
Mm,
with, driving kids or staying with them. And, the summers were obviously the hardest because they were home, but I was off doing my internships, and
right.
we didn't, I had always been the childcare, so that was difficult. Uh,
Okay. Wow. That honestly sounds like a nightmare. I don't like science. I mean, I love the results of science,
yeah,
right?
right.
But I was an actor and, I studied like communication in college and,
Yeah.
you know, I'm a creative, just like naturally that's where I lend to. So science for me was always like unimaginable, which is similar to your transition from language
Yeah.
to science. I get why that could have been overwhelming, even in training the way that you learn, right?
Yeah. The funny part about it is the reason why I studied Russian language initially is to avoid taking physics classes. I needed a certain number of credits, and they were like, you can take physics or you can take Russian in high school. I was like, I'm definitely taking Russian. And then I was fascinated and just went on to study it in high school. But it was all because I didn't want to study science. I didn't like it either.
Look at that backfired. My
Mhm.
clients, I give my clients a motto when they start working with me. And the motto is the greater the resistance, the greater the reward, right?
I
Because,
love that.
right, a lot of times the things that we're resisting, it's the energy of the thing that propels us to the
Yeah.
destination that we want. And you're a perfect example of that because you could have taken those darn classes,
Yes.
uh, but you just did it later. Okay.
I'm writing that down. I love that quote.
Yeah, use it. Use
I
it, girl.
will. I will
Um,
credit it back to you.
yeah. So actually it's probably not mine, but that's okay. So let's see. Okay. So you might manage to get your master's degree.
Hmm.
So you get your certification. You're ready to do what now? Do you get a job? Do you start your own business? How do you find clients?
Yeah, I went right into private practice. I knew that that was what I wanted to do. I told you at the beginning that we love to travel, and I wanted kind of the flexibility to do my own thing. I also really wanted to be able to serve people in my own way. So I went right into private practice, and that's kind of where another sort of huge transition and pivot point came in for me, which is when you're a dietitian, you are trained in a very classically weight-centric model of nutrition and health. And so when I
Okay,
thought
let's
about,
pause on that. Let's talk about
uh-huh,
that for a moment.
okay.
A weight-centric model of health.
Hmm.
What does that
Hmm.
mean?
So basically, just that, weight is a very large focus of that, right? I was trained to calculate, calories and energy requirements and look at BMI and, a lot of, if you have a health condition, weight loss seems to be always the first thing they point you towards, and just very much centered around weight as an integral part of health.
Okay, so the weight-centric model, is
It's
using that number to indicate the effectiveness of your overall health, of this, of that, of the improvement. Okay,
mhm.
so that's where you came from. You were like, no, this doesn't make sense.
Well, I knew initially that I wanted to go in private practice. I thought, okay, I'm a new dietitian, right? What most people think of nutrition and support, and they couple that with weight
Weight
loss.
loss, right?
I didn't really want to do that. I didn't love talking about it, but I felt like I had to, that that's what was expected of me, what people needed, and what I should do. And so for a very hot second, I did that and immediately became clear to me that that was not the path I wanted to go down for a couple of reasons, which I'm happy to share
Yeah,
if you
why?
want to. So two things I think happened at the same time. The first one is I was working with a few people who wanted weight loss, and it became really obvious to me, or clear, that people could be feeling really great about the changes they were making to their food, to their movement, to their lifestyle habits,
Mm,
and feeling really good about it. And then if they stepped on the scale and it didn't show a number they liked or fast enough or big enough, they immediately would say things to me like, Elizabeth, it's not working. And I
yeah.
would be thinking, what do you mean it's not working? Like, look at all these amazing changes that you're making that
Mm,
will absolutely impact your health. But they were frustrated. And that just instinctively or intuitively didn't feel right to me. And then the
yeah.
second thing that happened was, by this point, my kids were late middle school, high school ages. It just, there were so many people in our orbit that had really fragile relationships with food and their bodies. And,
Mhm.
I was encountering them and thinking about whatever I'm putting out, my own kids are watching, their peers are watching, and I wanted to be super careful about that. And it was also so obvious to me the overlap between weight loss behaviors and disordered eating behaviors.
Mm,
And so all that kind of coalesced, and I just thought, that's not the space that I want to be in. I really want to go down this different path. So I threw myself into it called intuitive eating.
yeah. I've read this
And
book.
okay, awesome. So you're
Yep.
familiar. So I threw
Hmm.
myself into intuitive eating, the research behind it. I really dug in. I eventually went and got certified as an intuitive eating counselor and really started exploring kind of weight inclusive care and fat positive care and weight neutrality, and just really understanding the importance of having a happy, healthy relationship with food as a solid foundation to support your health and well-being. And I think so much of the diet culture we live in not only doesn't promote that, but actively undermines it. And it's
Mm,
not healthy and it's not
mm,
helpful.
mm. Okay. Yes. Yes to this for sure. And now I'm wondering, for those who are not watching this podcast and they can't see you,
Uh-huh.
you are a very attractive, healthy looking, and from the appearance of your chest up, you seem to be slender.
Uh-huh.
Okay.
That is true. I live in a thinner body.
Okay. So how do you end up being passionate about, you know, like getting rid of the weight centric model? Did you struggle with your weight in your life, or was it something else that lit that fire in you?
I would say it was something else. I've never really struggled with my weight in my life, just genetically. I'm thinner,
Blessed. Blessed.
thinner in stature. Um, but of course, I think most women struggle with body image here and
Oh
there,
yeah. Oh
right? And
yeah.
so I'm very familiar with, the pressures of feeling like your body has to fit a certain mold.
And you had 3
Um,
kids. And that's a whole
yeah,
body transformation
yeah,
3
of
times.
course. And I would say initially, most people who kind of make the leap from kind of weight centric to weight inclusive care, there's this period where you're kind of straddling the fence
Mm.
because you're so trained in this one way and you're learning all this new research and this new way, but you feel a little torn between two worlds. It's a really common place to be. But I would
Yeah.
say the thing that really pushed me over the fence fully in the other way is once I pivoted my practice and began working with people who had struggled in and out of dieting and diet culture throughout most of their lives, who experienced, weight stigma and fat shaming and
Yes.
had the experiences of going into medical offices and, just being told, just lose weight and
Mm,
it will, that will fix it. And then not being able to kind of do it and keep it off and, um, feeling everything that comes up around that and feeling
yeah.
like it was their fault when
Yeah.
the research tells us it's not, right? It's
Ooh. Okay, hold on. I want you to say that again. Back up. They have this experience, they're feeling like their weight is the issue, they're feeling shamed, and tell us about the research. What does the research show?
yeah, well, so there's just gaslighting, right? Just try harder, have more willpower, do this next diet. You just didn't want it badly enough. When the reality and the research shows that there's actually not a single evidence-based diet that has been shown to help people lose weight and keep it off over the long term.
So I've heard that being on a diet is the number one indication of weight gain. Is there any
Mhm.
merit to that?
Yeah. Yeah, there is research to show that. And I think it's, there's a host of metabolic changes that happen when you are get calorically deprived and your bodies learn how to compensate for that. And
Mm.
over time, the more you diet, the better they get at compensating, the harder it gets. And then there's these rebound effects of what are you doing when you're dieting? You're restricting and depriving yourself, right? And often just underfed. You're not consuming enough calories for your body. And there's this, it's almost like pulling a pendulum back, right? And then you can maybe willpower your way through it for a time, but then biology kicks in, the psychological effects of restriction and deprivation. And, the pendulum goes, and pendulums don't just come here in the middle, they swing way far out to the other side.
You're
And
woo, girl, you are filling me with fire right now. Um,
tell me, what are you thinking?
it fills me with so much. I don't even know what it is. It's fire because, first of all, my own journey.
Mhm.
I was vegan, vegetarian for 10 years, a combination of it being health and weight loss, and the other
Okay.
part being an evangelical belief system about what is best, right? I
Yep.
said I did that for 10 years. I don't do that anymore.
Yep.
But I invested a lot of my time and energy in trying to understand dieting, my body, nutrients, vitamins. I've done it all. And
Yeah.
I came to the conclusion after veganism, again, I was evangelical. Like I was the one that would convince you to be vegan. After that started wrecking me physically and mentally and emotionally,
Mhm.
was crazy. Back knee, brain fog, weight gain. I mean, no matter what I did, raw veganism, cutting out sugar, cutting out alcohol, exercising 4 times a week, sleeping more, it just didn't matter. And I went
Mhm.
and I saw an acupuncturist who did muscle testing and whatever, but she really talked me off the ledge and was
Uh-huh.
like, "What is your body telling you?" And I was like, "I
Uh-huh.
want a hot dog." She was like, "Okay, maybe not like the optimal choice in food, but it's saying that you are craving kind of meat, right?"
Yeah.
And that transition in my life, it changed the way I looked at my body. I started like literally listening to what my body wanted and having gone from that, like, this is the way to eat and this is the way to do it,
Yeah.
blood type diet. I mean, keto, I did it all to a
Mhm.
place that was more like, no, this is what my body's kind of telling me. I'm now in a place, I think I'm lit on fire because I still see a lot of my closest friends in this world of I need to lose weight, or the doctor told me that if I don't lose weight, then this is the issue. And so I see them very close after having a baby, even like
Mhm.
within like 5, 6 months after having a baby, now they're doing HIIT workouts.
Mhm.
They're trying keto. They're doing all of these crazy things. And my message gets lost. When I tell
Yeah.
people like, hey, maybe don't do that. Like, don't
Yeah.
send yourself into like a state of fight or flight. Like, why don't you give yourself a little bit of nurturing? It's just really not heard. And you know what? I'm not a dietitian. You are. So
Mhm.
I'm loving what you're saying. Um,
Yeah, I think that's so common, right? Is that I think it's really helpful to have a name for it. That is diet culture. When you feel like you just constantly have to be trying the latest, greatest, new plan, new diet out there, when you're trying to it becomes cult-like, right? Trying to,
Yeah.
get everyone else on board, feeling like your body isn't good enough, that it's all
Yeah.
about kind of fixing it or changing it, or that if you're not at least trying to lose weight, that you're doing something wrong. Those messages that moralize our eating, right? We get so many messages. Just even think about the way that we talk about food, right? Healthy versus unhealthy, clean versus
Mm.
junk, good versus bad. Those are
Mm.
very black and white, right? There's no room for the middle road, the gray. And a lot of people start to think of themselves as good or bad based on what they're eating,
Wow.
right? Like this,
Huh.
and I felt it too. I was also a vegetarian for a long time in a former part of my life. And, I felt like I had the moral high ground in a
Yeah,
way, like I'm
totally.
doing the thing to take care of my body.
Yeah.
And,
And the
but
environment. Yeah.
yeah, but really, food has no moral value. You're not good or bad based on what you're eating. And our
Ooh.
bodies are meant to look different. We're given this like one kind of standard ideal of what our bodies are supposed to look like in terms of sort of, shape, size, weight. And if you sit back and think about it, it's actually ridiculous. Of course, our bodies look different, right? Some people super tall, some people very short. Some people are naturally going to be more fat than other people. And that's not bad. There's nothing wrong. That's just body diversity at
Mm.
work. We're natural beings. But when you're the person out there trying to say that, you are very much swimming against the tide.
And I
And
and I have to ask too, like the other side of this that I never wanted to touch because I don't relate to this experience is
uh-huh.
the body positivity. Let's just take Lizzo, for example.
Mm-hmm.
She calls herself a big girl, right? The dancers in
Mm-hmm.
her show, they're big girls. They look to be obese. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and the narrative around that is like, it's okay for me to eat junk. It's okay for me to be big. It's okay for me to do all of these things. I'm still going to be sexy and like throw it all in your face. Um,
Mm-hmm.
the where I am quite frankly like I don't know how to feel about this is because on one hand, I think Lizzo is like a superhero.
Yeah, yeah.
She's incredible, and I admire her so much as a professional, as a businesswoman, and as an artist. And on the other side, like I really don't like. I had to unfollow her on Instagram because it didn't. Something was like disconnecting for me. It was like, can you be body positive, be bigger, but also like not tell people it's okay to eat trash all the time?
Mm-hmm.
And so I want you to help me unpack this from your perspective. Is this even narrative of like you can be big, you can be fat, you can eat whatever you want, and be potentially unhealthy? Is that also part of diet culture?
I would say so, yes, because now I don't follow Lizzo on Instagram, so I'm not exactly sure what messages are coming up on her feed all the time, but there's this inherent assumption that many of us make because we're brought up in diet culture and we've grown up in a culture that is rife with fat phobia and weight stigma. There's
Yeah.
this narrative that if you are that person, and I don't love the labels for the BMI, I think it categorizes bodies in a way that we
Mm.
shouldn't. So I'm not
Labels
going to
for the
use,
BMI would be things like what? Give me an example.
obese is one of them.
Obese. Okay.
Underweight, normal weight, overweight, and obese. That very language just stigmatizes bodies, right?
Okay. Okay.
And so sorry, I lost my train of thought for a second. But there's this inherent assumption that if someone exists in a bigger body, then they must automatically be unhealthy or not doing the things to promote and protect their health. I
Ah,
Those women, right? Lizzo's big girls, they're incredible dancers. I've got to
very
believe
good
that
shape.
they're quite fit, in good shape, and are doing things that many other people can't. So the first thing to unpack is just,
Mm.
and part of my work is challenging those inherent assumptions that we make because we've been brought up in diet culture. And then
Ooh.
also, I would say There's a lot of judgment and I'm not saying that you did this,
No,
but in
that's okay.
general,
I'm willing to be taught on this. Like, please tell me.
yeah, there's a lot of judgment around, shaming someone if we perceive that they're not taking care of their health, right? Well,
Right.
that's health isn't also, you're not people get to choose how they want to take care of their health. And it's
Mm,
not for me to judge how you are or aren't taking care of it. That's a very individual, personal pursuit. People have different seasons of life where,
yeah.
different things get prioritized, deprioritized. So that's like kind of my second thing that I would suggest. And then the third thing is the truth is that excuse me, healthy bodies come in all shapes and sizes, right?
Yeah.
You cannot tell a person's health by looking at them. And
Mm,
so do unhealthy bodies, right? I know plenty of people who are very, very thin and do not kind of take care of themselves and engage
right.
in health promoting behaviors, or they don't maybe eat optimally, right, to support their nutrition. But because they happen to live in a smaller body, people don't judge them. They don't make assumptions.
Oh, this
And
is
by the
good.
way, they get different health. They're likely to get different health care when they go into a doctor, right? Two people, one person in a larger body and one person in a smaller body can go in with the same medical condition and they will often get very different advice for how to manage that condition. And that's because weight stigma and fat phobia and weight bias is built into our medical system and healthcare also. And so weight
Okay.
neutral, to kind of close the circle, and then I'll stop and you can ask me whatever it was or say whatever you're about to say, but to close the circle, weight neutral care and weight inclusive care, what I try to do is let's take your body size out of the picture and look at what are you struggling with and what behaviors do we know might be helpful to help treat that condition, right? Because
Mm,
whether you are in a small body and have high
mm.
cholesterol or a bigger body and have high cholesterol, um, if you have the kind of high cholesterol we can influence through diet and lifestyle, those diet and lifestyle recommendations are going to be the same.
Wow.
So that's what weight inclusive care means.
This is really a break in the way I think most people, me, definitely me, think about it.
Mhm.
And even not even being aware of the stigma that comes in, right? Like
Mhm.
being aware of even just how using the word obese, right, is adhering to this weight-centric model. But
Mhm.
how then that shapes the way I think about it, because my background is an NLP, right? I'm all about empowerment, understanding how the mind works and the use of words and language really do shape our reality. If we're using weight centric language, and if even if we're trying, and I will say,
Mhm.
like, in my defense for those Lizzo fans out there, um, even in my trying to understand what's happening for me in that,
Yeah.
I'm doing it through a weight centric model.
Yes.
So you offer a different way, a
Yeah.
different set of language, of words to use to describe it. I find that really liberating.
Yes. I'm so glad you said that because first of all, I just want to make clear it's not my way, right? I'm not the creator of intuitive eating or the champions of this way, but there's lots of research to support it. It is out there. There are lots of healthcare professionals kind of pivoting and making the shift. And it when I'm working with people, that actually is the thing that they say most often is I feel liberated. I feel free. I always tell people you cannot once you see the harms of diet culture, you cannot unsee them. Once you
Mm,
know what they are and you recognize them and you start to understand how they impact all of us, by the way, it doesn't matter. It disproportionately impacts people in larger bodies 100% because we have all that bias built in culturally. But it also impacts people in smaller bodies, right? There's real fear of gaining weight. It causes body image distress. It still impacts people's eating and health and well-being in negative ways. It's just disproportionate towards people who live in larger bodies and feel the effects. Um, when I go into a doctor's office, I'm and I keep picking on doctors, really it's anywhere, right? How
Yeah.
you're viewed out in the world
Right.
is unfortunately a lot of times through the lens of diet culture and these narratives that we've
Mm.
been given, and the bias is built in kind of everywhere, to the science, to the medicine, culturally. But once you start to see them, you cannot unsee the harms, and there's this beautiful life that you get to create for yourself, and this really empowering way to approach your health and care for your health and well-being and just respect your body outside of diet culture. But it's a journey. There's a lot of
Mm.
unlearning you have to do before you can kind of relearn h- how to do this differently.
What do you say to the woman who's either single and wanting partnership with a
Mhm.
man, who's struggling with diet culture,
Yeah.
and or the woman who is partnered to, married to a man who also has the beliefs that, right, thinner is better, and that if you're bigger, you're unhealthy, or you need to lose the baby weight. Um,
Yeah.
what do you say to the woman that's dealing with diet culture in her own relationships?
Yeah. Um, I work with many people who are in that situation. And first, I just want to acknowledge that that's really, really hard, right? It is so hard to navigate that. I think it's really helpful to kind of look at what is your current relationship with food and your body, and is it serving you in the best possible way? And if it's not, and it's something you want to work on, starting to understand where those beliefs came from, where you first heard them, that where did you first make those assumptions? So in other words, what I'm trying to say is, I think um starting with yourself is really helpful, right?
Yeah.
If you can start changing your relationship to
Mm.
diet culture, to food, to your body, to your health,
Yeah.
then you're going to be able to have more meaningful conversations with those
Right.
people that are closest to you. Hopefully they will support you. If not, there's lots of support out there that is accessible and may be helpful. I would start by immersing yourself in, body neutral, weight inclusive, anti-diet, intuitive eating communities where you can start to get alternate messaging.
I
But
love
I
that.
think it starts with you, because
Yeah.
ultimately, no matter what you're talking about, right? Any topic, there are going to be people who don't get you. They don't understand what you're doing. They don't agree with it, and they judge you for it. And how do you deal with that anywhere? You have to first be really solid in yourself, right? And then
Yeah.
decide what your relationship is, what boundaries you want to set, what you're willing and not willing to.
So let's give the listeners just some practical advice.
Hmm.
In terms of, you gave great advice about finding the resources out there, but for the listener right now that's like, you know what, yeah, this diet culture is nonsense.
Yeah.
What can I do right now to practically start breaking the power that diet culture has over my life?
Yeah, I love this question. Okay. So first I would say just start to observe it, right? We're so immersed in it that it doesn't even feel weird when someone, uses a label from the BMI, or when they, talk about food in a certain way, or when they're talking about their diet, or saying something like, "Oh, I was so bad, I ate such and such," or, "Oh my gosh, how many calories might be in that?" Or all the advertisements
Oh
that you
yeah.
get. So first, just start to observe it in your life. Have a
Yeah.
name for it. It's diet culture. Know that it's toxic, and it's probably undermining your relationship with food and your body, and that
Mm.
relationship matters. It's how you show
Yeah.
up in your life. So start to observe it. Then once you notice, like, wow, even just today, right? You could probably come up with a bunch of ways that diet culture has infiltrated your life. You can start to push back on it a little bit. So how can you do that? First, a really kind of easy one: curate your social media feed. If there are people out that you're following, groups that you're in, influencers you are following who are talking about diets, promoting quick fixes, um, you know, uh, always talking about weight loss, if they're, you know, body shaming or food shaming, unfollow, block, mute, leave the groups, replace them with some intuitive eating, body neutral, anti-diet accounts so that you'll start to see different things in your social media feeds.
I love this. I call this the metaphysical environment. Who are you
Mm,
listening to and who is inundating your thoughts without
yes.
actually being there? So curate
Yeah.
your metaphysical environment. I love it.
Yeah. Pay attention. Like don't listen to, hopefully you don't have any of these, but I didn't see any. Don't, maybe don't listen to that podcast that's all about weight loss, or turn the channel when the, latest diet commercial comes on. If you're in a group of people and everybody starts talking about their diet, you have options. You can excuse yourself and go to the bathroom. You can change the subject. You can, in your mind, just know, oh, that's what she said. Like, this is a diet culture conversation. And recognize, if you're in a, let's just use, because it's common for a group of women to be having a conversation and to, say something negative about their body, or to talk about how they need to lose weight, or they don't like this part of their body. Just stop and think for a second. No one leaves that conversation feeling good, right?
Mm.
If you're, if you,
It's so
it starts,
true. It's
it
so true.
automatically makes you start questioning your own
You
body,
start
your own
being
eating.
completely critical, and then you do that thing where you're doing like the false humility, especially if you're the one that is maybe
Mm-hmm.
in a thinner
Yes.
body. Then no, girl, you look good. You're gonna bounce back. You start doing this
Yeah.
sort of it's not genuine
Comparison.
comparison. Yeah, it doesn't
Mm-hmm.
feel good. It's awkward, quite frankly.
Yeah, and it doesn't feel good for anyone. So just
Yeah.
know you don't
Oh,
have to participate in those. You have
it's such a
options.
that's such a revelation. That one tip right there is really truly is enough to make I think anybody listening say, "Oh, this isn't actually hard work." I
Yeah.
can just it's awkward having those conversations anyway, so, like, I could just opt out.
Yeah, yeah, you can opt out. And I mean, healing your relationship with food is hard work because it's so deeply ingrained. I don't want to give a false impression about it, but
For
there are these
sure,
simple ways that
but
you
there's
can dip
simple
your
ways to
toe.
start,
Yes.
right? And I think that's the
Yeah.
takeaway from this, right? You can start with these small things now to bring awareness to diet
Yeah.
culture.
Can
Okay,
I give you
were
some
there
more quick
more?
ones?
Yeah, mhm.
The next one, I would say, just start to notice your own language and thoughts around food. Are you thinking of it in terms of healthy, unhealthy, good, bad, clean, junk? And, an obvious question is, well, but some foods do have more nutrients than others, right?
Yeah,
A broccoli
yeah,
is
that gallon
better
of
for
Bluebell
you.
ice cream in my freezer, that's
Yeah. But what
delicious.
I would say is that food is food, and there's a place for all of it in your diet, right? And so if we just come with a different perspective of any food can fit, and you learn how to listen to your body and you're following how you want to support it, we don't have to get in this like good, bad, dichotomous space. All foods can
Mm.
fit. So start to just notice
Oh,
your
that's
thoughts around
challenging. Yeah,
food. Yeah, I mean, and you
that's
will like
challenging.
notice, are you feeling guilty or if you eat certain things? Does it stress you out to think about going to a restaurant and, maybe knowing what to eat because none of that's on your diet? Just start to notice your thoughts around food and how you're labeling it, and see
Good.
if you can just work towards more neutral, right?
Okay,
Some
yeah.
have more nutrients, some foods have less. Food
Okay,
is
good.
all foods fit, right? Just start to
Right.
notice that. And then the third tip that I was going to tell you is, maybe instead of even if you have a health goal, or um, if you wanting to make some changes, instead of thinking about it through the lens of weight loss, think about it through the lens of, what are the health behaviors you'd like to build? How do you want to
Mm.
care for your body? We're so used to thinking about how, in a way, controlling it, controlling my weight, managing it, hitting a number on the scale, which ultimately is about trying to change your body. Can you think about, how do I want to care for my body today? What are the things I want to do that support my health and well-being? Right? You
Wow.
can add vegetables to your plate, right? You can choose whole grains. You can eat a cupcake without guilt. You can move your body in a way that's fun. You can rest. You can lower your stress. There's so many amazing things you can do that are health promoting, and you don't have to focus on weight loss. And frankly, it's more empowering and more sustainable.
Yeah, absolutely. I love what you're saying. It's really giving language, a narrative, and a community space to let everyone relax around
Exhale.
it.
Yeah.
Exhale.
Yes.
You know, it's interesting because I've done a lot of my own journeying to trying to figure this
That sounds
out.
like it.
I've done a lot, but I'm nowhere near where I would like to be in terms of feeling that relaxed nature around food. And I'll tell you, when it comes to children, for example, I would love to hear what
Mhm.
you have to say about the standard American diet that we feed our
Mhm.
children, and those mothers like me who choose to be very specific about what my children eat, more so in terms of what they don't eat, right? So, my 2-year old, almost 2-year old, she does have an egg allergy and she has a
Mhm.
dairy sensitivity and a couple of other things like kiwi and stuff like that, right? So I do have to monitor her food
Mhm.
intake. But when she goes to her school, the menu is heavy dairy, heavy
Mhm.
complex carbohydrates, and a lot of like processed sugar thrown throughout. So like a lot of the snacks will be things like, you know, prepackaged processed foods, right? So I'm not comfortable with her having those foods. So I
Mhm.
will supplement
Mhm.
with vegetables, fruits,
Mhm.
whole grains, that sort of thing. I'm opening myself to like teach me in this moment
Yeah.
because there's people that look at that and say, "Oh, you're super controlling. Why can't you just give your kid chicken nuggets?"
Mhm.
Like what's the big deal? Like as long as they're eating, they're alive, it's good. What's your thought on how we feed our children?
Yeah. So I'm going to preface this answer by saying I already told you I was not a dietitian. I did not know about intuitive eating when my kids were smaller. And from an intuitive eting perspective and wanting to help your kids have a happy, healthy relationship with food, I made just about every mistake in the book. So I always like to share that so that
Okay.
people know that there's absolutely no judgment in anything I'm about to share because when you learn differently, you can do differently or
Amen.
decide for yourself what does and doesn't work for you. But I can tell you that personally, with my own kids, they were middle school, high school at this point, but I completely flipped the way that I approach food, the way that I talk about food, the way that I go about, you know, really just approaching it in our house. And I think a lot of times, the best way to help your kids have a happy, healthy relationship with food is to make sure that you do too, because you're
Yes.
modeling it and you're talking about it, and you're putting it in front of them.
Yep.
So if that's something that you're worried about, I just would kind of give kudos to you that you're on the right path in thinking about your own relationship with food and wanting to kind of explore it and prioritize it. But I think it's easy to get so caught up in thinking, oh my gosh, I have to give my child the most perfectly nutrient dense, cleanest, most organic, most pure food, right? That's where I was.
Yeah.
And forgetting that we're only looking at one aspect of their health. We're only looking at their physical health in that scenario, and we're not thinking about their mental and emotional well-being in kind of how we do that in when we get so hyper focused about it. And all the research, most of the research shows that the the more we try to control or restrict what our children eat, the more likely it is to backfire and have the exact opposite effect.
What?
So,
Wait a
yeah,
minute. What?
yeah.
Wait a minute. What?
Yes. So parents who are, try to force their kids to kind of like say a parent is worried that their child is underweight. The more they
Okay.
try to force them to eat and put certain foods in front of them, the less likely the child is to eat those foods. Same
Interesting.
in reverse. If a child is worried that if a parent is worried that their child is in a bigger body and that they believe they should be losing weight and they're trying
Yeah.
to restrict their eating, they're more likely to actually eat more. Um,
Okay.
so it has the opposite effect. And my kids were the ones at the birthday parties who sat at the table and just like couldn't leave the dessert table. It was like a free for all. I now know that that's because it was pretty restricted at home.
Mm.
I can't say
Okay.
that they never had it, but it was definitely restricted, and I definitely talked about it a certain way, and I definitely, really pushed lots of other foods. It backfired. It had the opposite of its intended effect, and that is
It's fascinating.
really, really common. So what I
It
would, oh, go ahead.
before you go on, is there like an age? Is there like a point in which it's especially shown to backfire? Um, I'm asking that because my 2-year-old can kind of talk.
Hmm.
She doesn't have like strong food preferences. She'll kind of eat
Hmm.
whatever is in front of her.
Yeah.
Um, but she's getting to that age, which like she's about to be a toddler and she's about to like start exercising
Our own preferences.
more preferences. Do I have time to change?
100%. I changed it when my kids were middle school and high school. You absolutely have time to change it. And here's what I would suggest might be a good idea, um, is you get to decide which foods you put out, right? Especially with a 2-year-old. You're deciding what they eat and when they eat and where they eat. The child is deciding whether they eat and how much they eat. And so, a great strategy, a way that you can neutralize food for your children is, provide them with a balanced meal. What does that look like? Maybe it has some carbs, maybe it has some produce, some color, maybe it has some protein, maybe it has some healthy fats, right? You could put a treat on the plate with everything else and just watch what happens. The easiest way that I can answer this question, maybe, what tends to happen is our kids' intake regulates over days and weeks, not at a single meal. One day
Mm,
she might like eat the whole cookie and have a little bit of chicken and not eat anything else. Another day she might have a bite of the cookie, eat all the rice, and have all the carrots. Like, kids naturally self-regulate. We are, with very few exceptions, we're nearly all already born intuitive eaters. And
mm,
what does it mean to be an intuitive eater, right? Like, when babies cry when they're hungry,
yeah,
we feed them. They stop eating when they're full. It's really
right,
difficult to overfeed a baby. They simply won't take any more food. And then
right,
as they get a little bit older and they start eating solid foods, that they eat the things that they let you know what they want and what they don't want. And they
right.
still tell you when they're hungry and when they've had enough to eat. But what happens is, and they have a pretty good relationship with food at that point, right? It's
Yeah.
assuming they live in like a loving, food secure environment. But when we get older, these diet culture messages start creeping in. Our parents perhaps start telling us, oh, that food's not healthy, or this one has too much sugar, or um, you have to clean your plate, right? What are
Mm,
all those things doing? One, they're putting food on a hierarchy. They're making some
mm,
foods more exciting than others, right? You only get these cookies under very specific circumstances, right? But you have to eat chicken all the time. I'm picking on chicken, but so they put food on a hierarchy, which inadvertently can make some foods more appealing than others in an exaggerated way. And then they also inadvertently can teach you to override your hunger and fullness cues. If you have to clean your plate, that's a parent saying to you, I know better than you do whether you're hungry or full right now, and you have to finish that. When
mm.
really we should be trusting our kids, right? How many times, or maybe when you were growing up, I know it happened to me, you might walk into the kitchen and say to a parent, hey, I'm hungry. Oh, you can't be hungry yet. You just ate, right? We accidentally teach our kids to mistrust their hunger and fullness cues. We inadvertently put foods on a hierarchy and start influencing how they think about them, and they start categorizing them for them at a young age. Instead, if we could talk about food differently and we can give it to them differently. Now, I'm not saying
Mm.
you have to give your kid dessert at every meal, but I'm saying the more you just include it and it's a normal part of life, the less exciting and thrilling it's going to be for them.
That's a revelation.
Mhm.
My thought was if I don't introduce her to this until I have no control, then she might not want it. But
Yeah.
it's actually what you're saying is the opposite. That in
Mhm.
fact, not introducing it and not including it when she does get it, it's a revelation for her then. And now she's going to want more of it because it's been forbidden.
Yeah,
Whoa.
because think about it. As humans, we're basically hardwired to want what we think we can't have. I mean, think about just, it's a super easy example, but toilet paper in COVID. As soon as we
Yeah.
thought that there was a shortage, right? It didn't matter how much you had in your pantry. You felt like you should go out and load up on more because we had that human scarcity mindset.
Scarcity. Yeah. Fascinating.
I actually have a
Wow.
course of how to raise an intuitive eater. It's called Mastering the Art of Raising Kids with Food and Body Confidence.
That's amazing. Let's talk a little bit about that. So for somebody who's listening and they're wanting to work with you, how do they find you and how do they work with you?
Yeah. So I offer private and small group intuitive eating coaching. You can find me at, on social media at Elizabeth Harris Nutrition. I also have a Facebook community called Health and Healing with Intuitive Eating if you want to just come and lurk and linger and learn about it. And also just be surrounded by more food and body positive messaging. That's a great place to kind of come and be with me. And then you can come to my website, elizabethharrisnutrition.com.
Incredible. Who would
And
you
I
love?
think you can tell I'm really passionate about this
Yeah.
because you asked me in the beginning, like when, or I think I started to say, but I didn't finish. When did I fully like get over the fence and be in this camp? Is when I started to see the impact on people's lives that I was working with. It is about the food on your plate, but I promise you, your relationship with food in your body is about so much more and
Mm,
so much bigger and more meaningful than that. People,
mm,
it changes when you have a happy, healthy relationship with food and your body, it changes how you show up in the world and
beautiful.
how you experience life. And it's just a really beautiful thing. And also it improves people's health and well-being and
Hmm.
in a more holistic,
Yeah.
sustainable, empowering way. So
Yes.
I love what I
Amen.
do.
I can tell. I love what you do. So important. In fact, why don't you tell our listener who's maybe not sure if you want to hear from them, like who would you love to hear from?
Oh, well, anyone who found this conversation interesting and if parts of it are resonating with you, definitely reach out. In general, anyone who really either already knows that they don't have the kind of relationship with food or their body that they would like to have, that it's holding them back in different areas of their life, or who has been in and out of that dieting cycle so many times and feels the frustration and the guilt and the shame and is ready to break the cycle and do this differently, and learn how to rewire your thoughts around food and your body, and also how you can take care of your health. I would love to hear from you.
Amazing. Thank you so much for this
Uh-huh.
conversation. And before we wrap up, I just had to ask, you've got 3 kids, you got a husband, you had a career, you got a master's degree. Now you're an entrepreneur, right? You're
Yeah.
passionate about this movement to get rid of the negative effects caused by diet culture. How do you do it?
You know, how do I do it? I don't know how to answer that question simply other like you I just do. It helps when you're passionate about things, right? And also taking breaks. I told you we travel a lot. I really believe in the power of healthful self-care and I try to live that as my foundation and lean into that, where of course, which is what I'm all about, right? And giving myself permission to mess up and a community. I have a really strong network of fellow entrepreneurs and people in my industry and out of my industry, and making connections fill me up. And I think that's probably my best answer.
That's a good answer.
Okay, good.
All right. Elizabeth Harris, thank you so much for being a guest on the show. I can't wait to share this with the audience, and hopefully, audience members that found this helpful can also share this with someone who needs to hear about the damaging effects of diet culture so that really we can all be a part of this movement towards healthier relationship with our bodies, with ourselves, and with each other.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. It was a great conversation.